Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you all enjoyed lunch on that gorgeous beach. It's quite a pleasure to be here in such a wonderful heavenly environment with all of you, exploring these most interesting and timely topics. My name is Liana Gillooly. I have the great honor of moderating this panel called Demystifying Decentralization. So I will start by introducing our presenters. But before we do that, I'd like to get a show of hands from the audience over here. I'd like to start by asking everybody who in here does not currently own any cryptocurrency and it does not have any wallets. Excellent. Okay, raise your hands. Excellent. That's a lot. All right. So it looks like we have a lot of crypto newbies here in the house, which is why we decided to put this panel together in hopes of showing and explaining and empowering each one of you so that you too will be able to describe what the heck is going on here. So I'd like to start, the panelists are going to introduce themselves. We have Ameer Rosic, we have Shannon Ewing, and we have Alex Salkeld. So Ameer, why don't you go ahead and tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what makes you this the expert that belongs on this stage.
Well, thanks for the introduction. I want to call myself an expert. I don't like definitions. I'll make my bio super short. I run BlockGeeks. My business partner is Dmitry Buterin, Vitalik's father. For the last 2 years, we've been educating all developers around the world, and we're the world's biggest online trainers of developers and people who are looking to educate themselves in blockchain. As well, on the side with my business partner Jason, we run a venture fund incubator called Blockspring, where we invest in blockchain companies.
Definitely not an expert. I'm much closer to the new end of the spectrum, so I like to think that I'm still new enough to ask some of the same questions that new people have. My background's in international development, so I was typically in a village somewhere trying to get kids on computers and came across the space because of the birthday boy, Matt McKibben, and my friend Max Borders, and ended up here today. And I'm just really excited because I think this space is what's going to unify our world again.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm from Vancouver. I've been doing educational outreach for Bitcoin for about 4 years now, mostly on a grassroots level. We host weekly or monthly meetups specifically on Intro to Bitcoin or Intro to Ethereum. We also host a wide range of meetups around the technology at a more like 201, 301 level. And I've just been kind of the go-to that people I end up sitting around for an hour or two after every meetup and just answering any question I can because the technology really excites me. So, yeah.
So the people up here on this stage are getting constantly hounded by all of their friends about the most basic of questions. And much like many of you here in the audience, I was totally crypto illiterate up until about 10 months ago when I started exploring the space. And there's a lot to learn, but so we're going to start by going super, super basic. And we're going to start by asking the three of you, what is Bitcoin and what is blockchain? How does it work? And if you could, give it to us in a way that you would describe it to your grandmother, right? So give us the most kind of basic metaphors and things like that we can use to help understand this and so that we can go out in the world and educate others as well.
That's a good question. I actually want to echo what Andreas Antonopoulos says. I'll keep this super simple in 4 words. Is money for the internet.
Money for the internet.
Yeah, if you're trying to explain it to a grandmother, she understands the internet, she understands what money is. You put those two together, you have money for the internet.
Do you want to say anything else about what blockchain is?
Once again, to a grandmother?
Well, why don't we, I think we're all, we're all here because we want to learn. And
sure.
So if you want to go a couple layers deeper, it'd be helpful.
The simplest way I can say it, it is a distributed amounts of computers around the world that's not really controlled by anybody, that they talk to each other.
Okay.
It's a peer-to-peer system of computers. Anyone can join. So, okay, so I'll make another analogy. Who's used Google Docs here? Oh, perfect. Okay. So all of us are sharing a Google Doc right now. And if I type something in the Google Doc, you see it, right? Correct? Yeah. And if you change something, I see it. So it's like a public ledger among all of us on this Google Doc. And now, instead of thinking as a Google Doc, imagine if you were a computer, I was a computer, and each of you participating in this Google Doc was a computer. That at any given time, if anybody wanted to change something on this ledger, everybody would see it. But at the exact same time, everyone would have to validate that your change in this ledger was accurate. So it's a transparent ledger that every computer has the copy of, but every computer has to double check every other computer to make sure that information is correct. I'll do it in a nutshell.
Either of you have anything else that you'd like to add to this?
If I were speaking to my grandmother, who would never have touched a Google Doc, one of the ways that I like to think about it is, like, in the U.S. we have Social Security cards. And most of the U.S. citizens at one point have lost that card and have had a hard time getting an ID. And so rather than having the one card, it's like thinking of having 10,000 of them distributed around. So rather than having one organization that holds the information on all of those cards, you essentially you have so many copies, so much disbursement, that it would be the equivalent of trying to hack into a castle versus trying to hack into an entire city simultaneously with different keys. So how do we have that information that's widely available but also completely unchangeable because of what Ameer said about the fact that everyone would have to agree at the same time? So yeah, just think about having a paper document but having 10,000 of them rather than one.
So my favorite analogy that I use on my mom is most people kind of get what email is by now. And Bitcoin works really the same way, except instead of sending words, you're sending money, or you're sending in like value. So whereas Google or Hotmail or any other email service is what we use to interact with the email protocol, a Bitcoin wallet is what we use to interact with the money, and it works basically the same way. If you know the address you're sending to, if you know the Bitcoin address or email address in this analogy, you can communicate with them or send them something. And it doesn't matter where they are, it doesn't matter if they're around to receive it, you know it will get there.
Very good. All right, so now we have the basic understanding of this structure and this system, and now I'm wondering, and perhaps you can each share with the audience a little bit of your own personal story, but why should we care? And why are people so excited? And in what ways does this impact the world? People are up here on stage, talking about this all day. Can you share with us a little bit more of the mechanics about why this matters? And perhaps maybe why you care?
It's a good question. Okay, it's a good question. One of the people I really like is Milton Friedman, and one of his sayings is "free to choose." What this technology does, and you have Bitcoin blockchain, you have the Ethereum blockchain, you have Monero blockchain, you have all these different blockchains out there, and each of them are technologically a little bit different from each other, use cases a little bit different, features a little bit different. But what this technology enables each of us around the world, is free to choose. We have the optionality to choose what ecosystem we want to be part of. We have the optionality to choose what type of currency we want to use. We have the optionality to choose who we want to communicate. Because what is money? Money is a form of communication. It's an agreement between two parties that agree that something's worth X price and I'm willing to pay for that. Now, with this technology, we can choose any type of currency, let's say Litecoin, Monero, Bitcoin, and if you decide that you want to accept that, you are choosing your own right to accept a different currency. But what this expands beyond this is the fact that for the first time ever in human existence and civilization, you're not forced to use a government currency, which is, when you think about it, pretty remarkable. Like, for the first time ever, I have a secondary option besides the greenback or the Canadian currency. I can use Bitcoin. I can use Monero. So this opens up Pandora's box of optionalities and choices that people have. I think if I had to summarize what blockchain does is gives people more choices.
Yeah, just to expand on that, one of the big things is a lot of people don't have any choices even to use the greenback or the Canadian dollar. And with Bitcoin and other blockchain technologies, specifically the currencies, we're giving everyone in the world a chance to have access to banking instruments. So right now, I believe 2/3 of the world has no access to any sort of banking instruments. All they need is a basic cell phone. And nowadays, in even third world countries, they have decent internet, better than Canada in some cases. That's a fact. But now they'll all have access to banking the same way that we do as a normal thing. So even though we are all excited about it, Bitcoin and crypto doesn't affect the first world nearly as much as it will affect the third world.
Exactly. I worked in a village in Gabon, which is in West Africa, that didn't have electricity because the politicians were stealing the gas that was powering the generators. I went out there to get kids on computers, and the computers were still in boxes because they hadn't had electricity in months. And I've been waiting for governments to figure it out, for NGOs to figure it out, for somebody to start bringing in the resources so that we can start sharing them. And I ended up at this conference that was talking about blockchain and crypto, and I realized, oh my God, somebody just went and fixed it. We've been waiting and waiting for these intermediary, these powers that be to finally come and help us. And somebody just circumvented it and just went and fixed it. And that that provides such a communal way for us to interact now. That now you and I can interact with the rice farmer in Bali. You and I can now directly send money to our neighbors. There's no more yet Western Union. There's no more exchange rates. There's just us. And that creates a decentralized global community in a way that now we share the resources with each other.
And I think that one other thing is if you read the little
Yeah.
phrase down at the bottom of the
That's
sign,
nice.
it literally says, stop fighting the system, in paraphrase, stop fighting the system and just build something better.
Yeah.
And that's clearly, she was waiting for a solution from within the system, and now we just built something and it's irrelevant.
So we've seen the way in which blockchain creates a system that makes the old one obsolete. And I love that this quote is here. It's totally one of my favorite quotes. It makes so much sense for both topics we're here discussing. And we see a lot of talk and hype around the application of cryptocurrency on the blockchain. I'd like to hear and learn a little bit more about what other kinds of applications can be built on the blockchain that can have a massive impact on humanity and society. So outside of just the financial applications. So yeah, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say.
A couple of ones.
Legion.
Digital identity is a big one. So, for example, in Canada, actually North America, we did the Equifax hack. So basically, Equifax is responsible for doing your credit score rating. They have your SIN number, social security number. They have all your information. In fact, with your social security number, they can fraud everything of you. People don't understand that's a massive issue, getting your SIN number stolen off of Equifax. So in the future, you as an individual having the power and the freedom to actually control your data, that's a massive one. As opposed to other third-party companies such as Equifax, creating these arbitrarily weird credit rating systems and controlling your data. Let's switch that around, and for you to control your data and for you to decide which people have access to your data. Not some company profiting off of you or having very, very shady security, let's say, frameworks that you control everything at the end of the day. So that's a big one. We can go down the rabbit hole for many other things.
Just to add on to that, just so everyone knows who we've been trusting our data with, the Argentinian login for Equifax was literally admin and password.
Fantastic.
These are our experts. So, yeah, I think there's a bunch of really exciting applications. It's going to change real estate transactions and medical records and electricity and power grids, and I'm sure you have.
Yeah, I'd say the three main ones that people focus on right now are voting, and then as an extension of voting, governance, and then identity. So with voting, we're going to be able to be, once we have our identity and we are in control of our own identity, we are going to be able to cast votes in a way that we can check that we cast that vote. Anyone else can check that we cast that vote, not necessarily by us, but they will say, okay, this person, whoever that identity is, cast that vote, and you'll never be able to change it. And then once we can vote on the fly, we'll be able to vote on smaller scale things. So within communities, within the community, city, government level, we'll be able to have really on the fly votes for things and know for sure. And then there's obviously pitfalls there, like what happens if I sell you my identity?
Yep.
If you want to get 10 votes, I'll give you me $50 and I'll vote with you. So there's always problems that need to be solved. But on a micro level, the blockchain allows for entities to exist as if they were people. So your fridge uses a lot of power during the day and less power at night, and it could be trading with your laundry machine when it needs power, and say, okay, well, my fridge gets cheaper power, and it can just micro transactions are soon going to be possible that we'll be able to let our appliances basically and everything we do in a non-controlled way be able to communicate with each other and trade value, so things become more efficient and there's a lot less waste.
Yeah, so I'd love to jump into how each of you would define decentralization and how blockchain is part of creating that opportunity in our world and how that connects.
It's a complicated question because there's different forms of consensus when it comes to decentralization. There's a trifecta when it comes to scaling a blockchain. You can't have all three. So for a proper blockchain to scale, you need decentralization, you have scalability, then you have security. But you can't have all three at the same time, right? So you have to give one up for the others. So the question is, what do you give up, right? You have, for example, some blockchains that are running on a delegated proof of stake, which some say you're actually giving up security model, and there's an actual issue there. So I think Vlad and Vitalik, they had a really good paper on this and some thoughts. Fred Ersham, also one of the co-founders of Coinbase. I think in the future there's going to be different use cases for decentralization. There won't be an exact definition of what decentralization is, and we're going to have a multi-layer governing system. We're not just going to have a governance system like, oh, all the consensus is done on the Ethereum blockchain and the Bitcoin blockchain. We're going to have a multi-level governance system, kind of like how the United States was originally decided to create, where the states will counteract each other, like counterparty risk. So I think that's the direction that we're going. But to define what the decentralization is, I think it's a very difficult thing to define, and we have different use cases for it as well.
Yeah, I'm going to go a little bit more right brain with that one. That's gorgeous. And I think just real quick analogy, my favorite one so far has come from Mike Margulies, who said that, you know, as blockchain is a peer-to-peer system where you and I now interact with each other, psychedelics are creating a decentralized brain. So rather than having all the information come through one system, we're now creating new neural networks. And to me, that was such a beautiful overlay of what we're looking at here, because now it's not just all channeling through like the same communication channels and the same government channels, that we are now creating our own nodes. And we are, like, as individuals, decentralized with each other.
I like the soundbite of systems without a center of control. So you have, do you want the donut hole or do you want the whole donut? Right? You have this small thing where everything is forced around this one area, and everything happens in there. But when you get a decentralized system, it grows bigger, and everything can interact with everything. So that way you have just a system without a centralized power point. And it also makes it extremely hard to shut down, because all of the other systems like Bitcoin, similar internet money systems that have come around in the while, have all had a central point of failure that, through use of force in general, the government has just said no. And
there's some things that should be decentralized, and there's a lot of things that should never, ever be decentralized.
Like what shouldn't be decentralized?
My private company.
Okay.
I don't want there's no point for me to have a decentralized business.
Okay.
The servers are slower, information is slower, and I don't want people auditing what's happening in my company.
All right, so then how do you make the distinction versus what should be centralized and not? And how do you have those
Public
two
commons
systems?
good, like a currency,
Okay.
where it benefits everybody.
Okay. And that's how you have the two systems kind of communicate with each
course.
other. Okay. Great. Well, that was a very decentralized answer about the definition of decentralization. So I know a lot of people in here are newcomers, and I wanted to dive in to a few of the key terms and phrases that are so often tossed around these environments, just to make sure everyone's up to speed and educated about them. So we're going to go through a few of those, and then I'd really like to open up the audience to questions. So start thinking about, you've got these people here with a lot of information that, we have people in this room that probably want to figure out how to establish a wallet and how to put money in and pull money out of the system. So start thinking about the types of questions you want to ask, and I'd like to start by asking each of you, what is a private key and what is a public key, and how do these work and interface on the system?
So the way Bitcoin works and all these cryptos is you have two keys which enable you to send and receive your money. Your private key, which is the most important one, and then one piece of advice I have to always say is your private key is called your private key for a reason. You should never show anyone, and if you can avoid it, it should never even touch an online computer. The system's still early, so there's a lot of risks of hacks and stuff. So your public key is basically your email address that anyone can email you money, they can send you money. And once that money's in that public key address, the private key allows you to spend it. So when you're looking at a Bitcoin wallet, one of the most important things, or the most important factor you can look at is, does this wallet give me full control of my own private keys? Does it give me power over my own money? Because, as soon as we go to this new decentralized Bitcoin system and everyone's, excited and getting on board, then they use a company like Coinbase. Now, Coinbase is a wallet, and they will sell you Bitcoin, but they will stay in control of your Bitcoin. So we're basically trading one for another if you stick with a wallet like Coinbase, where they control your private keys. Now, unfortunately, I don't have any highly recommended mobile wallets right now. Samurai is the one I'm currently using. I'm going to call it a medium recommend, because I haven't had enough time to do the deep dive. But it allows you to control your private keys. It gives you full control over your own money, and we can go back to the whole early phrase everyone was using, which is be your own bank, which is a lot of responsibility. So learn before you dive too deep.
Right, and then that's a private key. What is a public key?
The public key is the email address, the one you can give to anybody, and the public key is all someone needs to send you money. And whatever public key you sent the money to, the associated private key is needed to spend that money, and it is losable. So be careful.
Yeah, 10% of the Bitcoin network is
Yeah, at least 10% of the Bitcoin in circulation is definitely gone. And if you go on the subreddit, every time the price goes up a lot, there's people saying like, I had Bitcoin a few years ago and I don't have this information anymore. What can I do? And there's about a 50-50 chance that it's just gone, and the other 50% is like someone really nice online goes through some weird steps with you and somehow you just recovered more money than you should have.
So that you bring up a really interesting point about the fact, and I think that many people who have some reservations about engaging with cryptocurrency have them because money and transactions can be lost forever and never recover. And so in our current banking system, there's certain insurance that you have. When your bank account is holding a certain number of money, you know that no matter what happens, that money is insured and that bank will it's a trust thing. I'd like to, what do you have to say about that to people who have a fear around the fact that things can be lost forever into the ethers?
That I share your fears. I have 2 children, and if something were to happen to me, they would not get my Bitcoin as currently stands. If something happened to me, my Bitcoin would be lost, and my children would never get it.
That's a big business right now. Legacy?
Legacy. So and I don't think that's really been solved yet, is the way we would transfer something to our children. And my children are young, so I can't explain to them a lot of these things, and it becomes a really hard problem, but as everything else over time, like things are getting solved.
Well, and I think there's just a little bit of an ethos of the space that comes with that, you know, like with the ability to get in touch with JP Morgan Chase and say, I've lost my password, please help me, comes the risk that if there's a run on the banks, they are going to lock your account down and you don't have access to something that is yours. So do you take full responsibility? This is mine, it's no one else's. I can lose this, I can keep, you know, like at some point there's kind of a level of like, be a grown up.
I'm a comic book junkie. I love Spider-Man, I love Wolverine. And Spider-Man, there's a saying in Spider-Man. So with great power comes great responsibility, and when you take responsibility for controlling your own keys and controlling your own money, you're responsible for everything. You're responsible for your private keys, you're responsible for the health of your public keys, you're responsible for your wallet. Above all, you're responsible for your habits. That's the most important thing. Because it is the Wild West right now, and there's so many different ways people can steal your cryptocurrencies, and that's a whole different topic. But at the end of the day, it's like you're taking responsibility. If you want control of your life, you want control of, let's say, your finances or your identity, you will need to basically have responsibility to handle all this stuff. It might get easier in the future, yes, but right now it's...
I still get nervous sending every transaction, just as instinctively. I'm like, you got to look at the addresses, you make sure, and I even get nervous after sending countless transactions, just because I know that if you make a mistake, it's gone, and there's no recovering. And that is a feature, not a bug. It is a feature that it's one-way transactions, and that makes it more secure. And as a side note, it makes it more vulnerable to certain types of things.
I think it's really interesting that one of the qualities that is important to this entire movement is that of personal autonomy and responsibility, and I think there's a similar kind of parallel we can draw with the psychedelic community as well. And I also think it's interesting that we're all like radically individualizing while creating these immense international borderless communities. It's kind of a paradox. So yeah, I don't really have a question about that. My next question actually is just back straight into basic terminology. Can you share with us what a smart contract is and how it works?
Go for it.
Okay.
We'll do 2 of them.
Yeah, that's a tough one. So it's one of those things that gets asked at our meetups a lot and is always answered differently by different people. And the best way to describe it would be a contract written online that will execute itself when conditions are met. That might say that when you receive, when the total this contract receives of 1 Bitcoin, it automatically gets sent to Matt. And so the contract would sit there. There would be a reason for people to send money to it, for whatever reason that would be. And as they did, every time there was 1 full Bitcoin in the contract, it would get sent to Matt. And that's the most basic example of it's just a self-executing contract that will execute when a certain set of conditions are met.
So I'll just expand on that. Who's used a vending machine here? Yay! Okay. You put in money, you press D7, you get a Snickers bar. Just take exactly what happened there and you have a smart contract online. It's if this, then that rules. Exactly as you stated, yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I'd love to actually take this moment to open it up to audience questions. This is really about educating you. So we'd love to know what you want to learn about, what you want to know. I walked around last night and I heard so many different things from people about their different areas of interest and expertise in the subject. So if anybody has any questions, please go ahead and raise your hand. Yes, in the back.
Yes, many pizza stories. He's asking about pizza stories, which is a reference to the first person to ever use Bitcoin as a currency spent 20,000 Bitcoins on 2 large pizzas. So I have countless pizza stories from 2013. I went to dinner, I bought beers. I shouldn't have to work anymore, but as a believer in this technology and currency, I've consistently used it as a currency, which seemed like a great idea at the time. It's been there for me when I needed it to, move or take care of some life issues. I think anyone who's been around for a few years has had a lot of pizza stories where they spent something and then it went up later, but there's no regrets, and I don't think that even the early pizza guy has regrets because he's forever the first person to do a transaction.
Well, and I think that's interesting. I had a conversation with somebody a few months ago that was talking about like this kind of deeper cleft in the space right now, that should it be a currency? Should we be using it at Starbucks to buy our gas and all of our transactions? Or should it be a resource or a store of value? And this gentleman said, okay, I have a chicken, and that chicken lays eggs, and now I have breakfast. Do I have a currency or do I have a resource? So we're starting to look at different ways of like we're bringing in our legacy concepts of what money is. So maybe we need to just start breaking apart the language around it and thinking more about how do we provide value in an exchange for value with each other rather than here's $275 worth of Bitcoin.
I'd love to actually just follow up and ask all of you on the panel if you believe Bitcoin will end up being more of a place to store value or be more of a place that's in transactions.
I will definitely say that Bitcoin will do all of those things. As more what we call layers are getting built on top of Bitcoin and allowing us to use it in different ways. Currently, especially as of a month ago, it was extremely expensive to transact on the network. Yeah. We're talking like upwards of 10 or 20 bucks to send, and the way Bitcoin works is you send any amount. So if you could be spending $10 transaction fee on your coffee, or $10 to send $1 million overseas without permission. Still a great use case for both, but you don't want to pay $10 for the coffee. But as more layers are getting built on, the Lightning Network is getting up and running right now, and that's allowing extreme micropayments. We're talking less, and your fees will be fractions of a penny. And
can you share a little bit more about what the Lightning Network is?
Yeah, so the way Bitcoin works is it allows you to do a lot of technically cool types of transactions. So there's the basic, I send money to you, simple as that. But it also allows us to do interesting kinds of transactions where I could say, I'm going to commit some money that I'm going to lock in to send to you, but I don't necessarily need to send it all right now. And that can be done for an indefinite amount of time. So now me and Matt have this channel open between us where we can transfer money back and forth instantly. It has the security of the Bitcoin network, but it's just back and forth over and over again. But as soon as Matt and Shannon, I got it right.
And Ameer.
Yeah. Oh. I've been getting it wrong the whole time.
You've just been staring at Matt.
I know. He's beautiful, so I can't help it.
It's easy to fix it.
So when Ameer and Shannon have a channel open, all of a sudden I want to send money to Shannon. The Lightning Network will know that because we both have channels open, it will just route around and it will make its way to her. And the way they are building the Lightning Network, they're doing a lot of work they didn't need to do. They're adding what's called onion routing, where naturally. They literally are adding, they did so much extra work to add in something that, for whatever reason, no one's talking about, but it's going to give us a lot of privacy. Where as soon as everyone in this room had 1 or 2 channels open with each other, I could send money to anyone in this room, and no one would know how it got there. It would just bounce through 20 people, which is the maximum amount of hops, and it would just make it there. And you'd only know who you got it. If you were one of the hops, you'd only know that you got money from this place, and you put it over there. You wouldn't know if the person you were sending it to was the last in line, and you wouldn't know if the person who sent it to you was the first in line. But you could know, through the magic of cryptography, that it's going to make it there, and the person would obviously confirm, like, hey, yeah, I got your money. So very soon, the channels are starting to be open. It's basically like Bitcoin was in the beginning. The developers are saying, don't do it. Don't open channels. It's not ready yet, but we're crazy, so we do it anyway. And when that's done, we'll be able to send global fractions of penny payments.
Awesome. So we have a couple more questions. You in the white shirt. I think that's Catherine.
I was really fascinated when you started talking about electricity, and I'm curious about the resources, the natural resources that are limited in renewable technology.
So just to repeat the question, she said she was interested in the electricity component and the natural resources that are going into the system right now.
Yeah, so currently Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum works on a consensus model called proof of work. It takes a lot of electricity. You need electricity to turn on your graphics card called ASICs, or at least for Bitcoin. In the future, many of the blockchains will not be on a proof of work mechanism. They're going to be on a proof of stake mechanism. So you're actually staking currency. Yeah, here we go. Here we go.
We should go into the difference between those if you have a moment as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
So proof of work, how it works in a nutshell, you have all these graphics cards that have to solve a random puzzle. It's called a nonce, this random number in the Bitcoin blockchain. And it's all guesswork. And it takes large amounts of computing power to figure out this guesswork. And once you figure out this random number called a nonce in the Bitcoin blockchain, you're rewarded a Bitcoin. However, it takes ridiculous amounts of energy to power all these ASICs, these graphics cards. But however, the question when you say consuming too much electricity, my question, and they've done the numbers on this, I don't have it top of my mind, is how much electricity does the banking system take?
And the carbon footprint
Or the
behind
carbon
things
footprint.
like armored trucks, the employees that go in those armored trucks, the production of the armored trucks, and that's just to transport the money.
Yes.
The carbon footprint behind Bitcoin will stay consistent and scale with itself, and the carbon footprint behind the legacy banking system and how we use money right now is factors more than what Bitcoin will probably ever consume.
Pretty much.
Proof of violence.
Proof of violence. You know how many guns it takes to keep everyone using the American dollar? It's a lot.
It's kind of a bounty on providing clean, sustainable energy. So the people that can provide the cleanest and most efficient forms of energy on the planet, they get the most Bitcoins. So it's an incentive structure to create those clean forms of energy.
Matt just said that there's a bounty basically being put on clean forms of energy, in that the more efficient you get, the cleaner you get, the more Bitcoin you will get from that. So we are now incentivizing the cleaning of the space.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
Yeah. In the back? Yeah.
Trilemma.
Scalability, decentralization, and security. Yeah, so if you're looking at building any blockchain, whether that is Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, etc., you can't have all three. You got to pick or choose 2 out of the 3. So the question is, which 2 do you pick over the last one? Most people are picking these days security and decentralization over scalability, which is smart in my mind. Scalability, if you just choose scalability first, you lose security and decentralization, which defeats the whole purpose of what blockchain is trying to create. So you as a creator of a blockchain, or you as, let's say, a supporter of, let's say, Bitcoin or Ethereum or Litecoin or Monero, whatever these different platforms out there, it's up to you to decide which one you believe fits your mythos or ethos much better. So just keep those in mind. You can't have all 3. You can only have 2 out of 3.
I'd like to follow that up with a very generic question that this kind of starts to answer, which is, what is an ICO? And what are people investing into when they invest into an ICO?
Ponzi?
Yeah, they're really investing into nothing most of the time. It's and I think the worst part about it is it's working. So some company comes out and says, I want to raise 50 million to build this blockchain.
Yeah.
You know, I have a new measure when I read a white paper from a company. I call it the BPP, blockchains per page. So you read their white paper, like how many buzzwords are they using and what do they really do? And a lot of the times these ICOs really are never going to accomplish anything, or already haven't, or never will. And the really sad part about the industry right now is it's so irrational and so new, and everyone's so excited and doesn't even know why they're excited, that they're all these companies that are raising insane amounts of money are actually like making all their investors money, even though they don't do anything. And it's gonna come to an end sometime, but who knows when.
Listen, ICOs are a remarkable innovation for raising capital, and it can be applied to many different factors of business. It can be applied to, let's say, crypto security models that we have, or tokenized security models in the future, or tokenized real estate, or dividend tokenized variation of it. However, for the most part, the reality is the technology today, we need years to really test the platforms out there. And for the most part, blockchains are actually horrible at a lot of things. Horrible at scaling, horrible at storing data, horrible for user experience. And if you look at most businesses, that's the opposite. You need scalability, you need instant transactions, and you need ease of use. So that being said, when you read these white papers and there's so much jargon and like AI, decentralization, blah, 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 they have no idea what they're talking about whatsoever. For the most part, a lot of times blockchain technology actually disables certain types of businesses and it'll enable other forms of businesses. I think right now the greed and the hype is outpacing the realities and the academia of what this technology can actually do today of this second. And also not to mention, like, if you look at regular investing, when you're an investor, regardless of if you're an accredited investor or if you're a non-accredited investor or if you're investing in real estate, you're investing in equity, you're investing in shares, or you're investing in dividends, right? For the most part, when you invest in an IC, you're investing in nothing. But what's worse, forget about not investing in nothing. You're investing in no business model. It doesn't exist. The business model is speculation. They need more people to come underneath them to buy more tokens for the most part. The token is not used with any, let's say, internal economic incentive. You know, they're not selling anything. They're not selling a service. They're not selling a product. So is it necessary that what's happening today? I think so. It's part of the process, you know. And at the end of the day, ICOs will evolve to other variations and forms. We'll have different forms of ICOs, whether that is, like I said, crypto, token equity. But for the most part, where we are currently, I think it's just smoke and mirrors.
Yeah.
Well, can I jump in and just add kind of an opposite perspective? Maybe I am a hopeless optimist. There is a ton of vaporware here. There's a bunch of projects that are bad and people that are just trying to steal money. It comes back to be a grown-up. Do your diligence. Look into it. Do you know anyone on the team? Does anyone you know someone on the team? Or do they actually have a product that's viable? But I mean, there are amazing projects that are coming out of this space, and that's why I believe in it as deeply as I do. There's a group called Native here that are doing all sorts of great things to create communities. My company is called Presearch. It's a decentralized search engine, and it's bringing it back to community and bringing it back to us caring about each other and us interacting with each other. And maybe it's 95% negative. And, you know, it could be
98.
terrible. But that 2% is totally worth it because those projects are going to change the world, and we are here to do it together.
It goes to Zipf's law. So you look at the power of law distribution, there's going to be a handful of companies that actually do well and actually have a problem that they're solving. That problem being eliminated is a massive benefit for the people around the world. For the most part, most of these ICOs coming in, it's a money grab, 100%.
Sure.
They're not solving nothing whatsoever.
So be a grown-up. Look into it. Don't throw your money at a flashy website that, you know, like they did a really great job and put together a paper. Like, make sure that you know what you're talking about.
$5 on Fiverr, get your own white paper.
Yeah. One of the things I would like to say about ICO is there's two Vancouver companies that I've spoken to, and when they mentioned they did an ICO, I kind of, I gave them a little trouble for it. And then the guy from the Brave Browser is the company, and he basically said if we didn't do an ICO, there's no way real venture capital would have funded us because we want to give privacy to internet browsing. We want to give you control over who advertises to you, and that kind of gave me a lot of perspective. That okay, these are bad, but there's certain companies that would never get funded. And the other one is Right Mesh. I believe they did an ICO as well, and they're from Vancouver, and they're great as well, and they're bringing small scale mesh nets to everywhere. So all you few people with cell phones in a village in a third world country are going to have accessibility. And on one last note, stop telling people to Google it. Presearch it.
Research it.
Absolutely. So I just have one more kind of follow-up question to all of that, which is how is any of this legal? And I'm looking at this more from a U.S. SEC perspective, but perhaps you want to talk about how the Canadian financial system deals with this as well.
So I've been speaking to OSC, the Ontario Securities Commission, also people from the SEC. At the end of the day, we're going to have a lot of scapegoats that come down on. A lot of people will be arrested this year, next year. A lot of these tokens will be viewed as securities 100%. There's going to be very, very few use cases where a token actually is a utility. So the thing here, I'll simplify things for people. If you can take a token out of an ecosystem, whatever project you're looking at, and replace it with anything else, that's a securities. Period. And 99% or 98% of those are the case. There's very few cases where I can take the token out and the whole system falls apart. In those cases, that's a utility. So it can't be defined as a securities. With the regulations.
What are those systems?
Sorry?
What are those systems? You said there's very few cases. Can you name some?
Bitcoin, Ethereum.
Okay.
That's one of them. Monero, that's another one.
Okay.
And those are just all the raw currency level
Yes.
too. Those are all protocol level, the raw.
Maybe
thing.
futures markets.
Can you explain that a little bit about why pulling Ethereum or Bitcoin out of the system would collapse the system?
The Bitcoin or Ethereum is used as it all kind of works together when you have a blockchain, a currency, and a protocol. So the protocol is how the computers interact. You know, the currency is the reward for having the mining process where you verify the transactions and generate the currency. So it all kind of works as this ecosystem where, you know, the miners do the work, they generate the new currency, they verify the transactions, and then if you took any one part of that out, the whole system wouldn't work anymore. You kind of need to have all three. But with ICOs, most of them are actually just built directly on Ethereum.
Yeah.
You can copy paste from the Ethereum main webpage. They tell you exactly how to do it. Copy paste this, launch your contract, and you will now be doing an ICO. And anyone who sends money to your contract will get your token. And you can say my token is called whatever, useless coin.
Alex coin.
Yeah, Alex coin. Yeah, no, a useless coin. I'd want Alex coin to do something, and currently it wouldn't be able to do much. And you can define what it does, and you can tell people what it's going to do. And it's kind of created a real negative in the space as Ethereum's become an ICO generator.
And so how do we interface if we're dealing and working in crypto with our, governing bodies that manage securities?
Well, I'll tell you another big problem that not too many people talk about. The point of failure in the space is exchanges. The liquidity of most of these tokens are in exchanges, whether that is Poloniex, Bittrex, Binance, you name it. And let's say, like right now, we do a token, and it's worth whatever, $500 million market cap. A majority of the transfer, the liquidity, actual movement of our token, it's on Binance, for example. And if Binance, for example, gets a letter from like regulations from Securities Commission saying, hey, you got a securities tokens on there, you got to delist it. Imagine overnight that if one company or one exchange delists your token, that the whole value of your company disappears overnight. To me, that's scary. That's just ridiculous. And so what first needs to be done is we got to really figure out how do we create better exchanges. How do we create both regulated, let's say regulated, unregulated exchanges, security models, frameworks, and also when it comes to raising, let's say you want to do an ICO and you have people want to do it. There has to be, and Vitalik talks about this, Trubit talks about this, and even Chris Berninsky talks about this, where if you look at traditional financing and investing, if I'm an angel investor and I give you seed money, I give you $500,000, that's it, you're not getting any more. Prove to me what you can do with $500,000 first before I give you $1 million. Then once you prove your business and you actually have a business model, we'll give you a Series A, which is $5 million. So tokens can do this right now. And the reason they don't do it because they know exactly what the hell's going on. They know they can actually ship product. So they don't want to do this system where they say, yeah, we'll agree that we'll raise $5 million from our founders, but we're going to keep 95% locked up until we prove to you that we can actually get the job done. And these frameworks exist today, but the majority won't do it.
And then the opposite again, just for devil's advocacy, rather than continuing to play within a system that we're kind of facing is broken, you can go see our friend Randy and go live in Tahiti, where we're doing a startup society and creating a new system. So, different ways of approaching it.
Okay, so we have time for just one more question. Anybody? Yes, go right ahead.
So the question was about how we be really inclusive in this space in terms of gender, race, and what each of us are doing to make sure that we have inclusivity. Well, I'll just jump right on that since Mark's speaking. I think this is the most important thing, that we go out and we have the conversation about why this space matters. Because from the outside right now, it's really easy to think that it's all about money and it's all about return on investment and we're all here because there's money to be made, and there's a lot of speculation in the space right now. And on one hand, we need new people coming in to keep it fresh and to keep it growing. But we also use that to spread the word about why this matters. So bringing in our friends from the psychedelic spheres, bringing in friends from different political spheres, like starting to build concentric circles around it and say, this is here for all of us. And to continue to spread that ethos of inclusivity because it's inherent. Satoshi created this because he wanted us to interact with each other, and that means everyone. So I think it comes from our decentralized conversations about why we care, and I personally will continue to shout it from the rooftops because this is it, this is us,
I have something I'd like to just add into that really quick, which is that all of this right now is extremely malleable, and we're writing the future, a future that doesn't yet exist amongst each other, and we have to be extremely proactive in inviting in voices that are not like our own into the conversations that we are having. When we're building our teams, when we're building our companies, when we're going out into the world, we have to be extra proactive about inviting all of these voices into the direct conversation, because if it's the same kind of classification of people that's been guiding and steering and running our old financial system that's birthing this new financial system, it's going to have some of the same pitfalls. That's just how this is going to work. So the onus is on us, and we have to actually make an even bigger effort. Even when we think we're doing enough, we're not. Trust me, we're not. And so we have to keep building that. And my biggest thing with all that is that if you're building any teams right now, you better make sure it's diverse and includes women. So.
Woo! Yeah, just as a little soundbite like that, Bitcoin does not care why you join or why you get involved. Bitcoin is here to help everybody. And when the system is built and everyone has access, it's not going to matter who you are, where you're from. You're going to be able to participate, and you're going to be able to participate easily and cheaply. So it doesn't matter why you get involved in the first place. Bitcoin's here for everyone.
I think that's awesome and important. I also think that we have to think about access. And the fact that although Bitcoin is like widely, and it's like the problem that can, or it's the thing that can solve all of these problems for all kinds of people all over the world, if people are not educated and not aware of the options and the opportunities that they have, they're not going to participate. And so it's actually, we have to go into those spaces and into those communities and have this conversation as well. And not just assume that because the structure's so good and it's in the model and it's built into the framework of the system, that that means everyone's going to have access.
It's all about creating leaders. We think that's our job to educate the world and educate. I love education. I never went to high school. I'm self-educated. I think education is a huge aspect of life. But sometimes from your own egotistical aspect, we believe that we should be always educating people. I'm a firm believer. Instead of trying us educating the masses, let's create more leaders, actual people that can go out there and do what they got to do. Right. So let's create more leaders in this space, whether that is the psychedelic space, whether that is a crypto space, whether that is, ecology space, it doesn't matter, but we need more leaders out there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, so I'm going to end with one final question to each of you, which is if you had one piece of advice for anybody that wants to start engaging with cryptocurrency or with blockchain technology, what would that be?
It's a good question. Talk to as many people as possible. One of my favorite investors is Ray Dalio, and he has a saying, triangulating your opinion. A lot of times we get caught up in our own cognitive biases, right? We see things through our own eyes, and we see through, and our friends, our co-circle, they're usually alike, we're the same people, right? So we have this confirmation bias among us. I'm a firm believer in you need to find people who are devil's advocate to what you like or what you think is best. You need to find people who are neutral. And by talking to as many people as possible, you can see commonalities within their answers. And through these commonalities of answers, you can, for the most part, see kind of a truthful response of what kind of truth that you're trying to search for out there. So talk to more people.
I love that. I've been telling people to find people that they can trust, and I think crowdsourcing that trust and knowing that the aggregate is going to have some truth in it, and to stay open and stay curious, because this space moves like these guys just learn something from each other. It's moving so rapidly. Just continue to kind of navigate the white water.
Mine would be number one is when you're interacting with Bitcoin, make sure you're controlling your own private keys, and you start to learn what it is. But if I could I tell a CryptoPsychedelic story that I think is extremely relevant?
Please.
So actually, and it goes to 2011 and 12 actually. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with the original online darknet market, the Silk Road, which is where you could purchase anything online and get it delivered to your house. And I'm a bit of a researcher myself on the Silk Road. I find it super interesting. And I came across something only a week ago called the LSD Avengers. And it was a very early group of people on the Silk Road that would go out of their way to buy every distributor's version of whatever acid they had, and they would buy everything and review it. And they saw this as their personal responsibility. So it was just some people, and they said anything we review has been taken by one of our team. They would tell you how good it is. They would tell you if it was just some lab knockoff chemical. And this is a group that just did it because they wanted to help people and they had the expertise. So way back when that was probably what I think would be the first real joining of Bitcoin and psychedelics was the LSD Avengers on the Silk Road. It was a real thing.
Harm reduction and transparency.
Harm reduction is what it's all about.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, that's about it for this panel. Please be sure to come up to us and ask us any other questions that you might have. And thank you so much. Please give a round of applause to our panelists here. Thank you so much. Absolutely.